All right, we're gonna now start talking about the effects of the Crusades, and then we're gonna talk about the Crusader aspect that deals with taking back Spain from the Muslims, or we would call them the Moors in Spain, which is known as the Reconquista in Spanish, or the Reconquering in English. So, some of the effects of the Crusades. Number one, the things we already kind of looked at in section 4 of chapter 7, it definitely opens up economic expansion because the supply routes used to bring goods to the Crusaders and the 200 years in which the Crusaders are kind of running the Holy Land are going to open up Western Europe for the first time since the fall of Rome to goods from the East. And it's really going to kind of put the idea of like bringing back trade on steroids almost, if you think about it, because it's really going to open up the trade routes. Because the trade routes now in the Middle East, the middleman, is going to be controlled by Christian knights who have taken back this land in 1099. They're going to hold that land almost till 1299. So they're going to have 200 years in which they're running this area. So definitely trade. That's a good thing. Also, monarchs are going to have their power grow. We've talked about the expansion of monarchy when you had Mr. Winter's flips on section 1. Um, Monarchs are going to buy up a lot of the land that's left by a lot of the crusaders who went and died in the crusade. Monarchs are going to take that land. And we see in the Third Crusade that the kings of the Holy Roman Empire, France, and England are going to lead a joint campaign, even though it's not successful. But it's going to be, he shows you the power of monarchs to kind of get into this crusader spirit and use it to control their nobility. So that's important. Also, too, if you think about it, this High Middle Ages idea of papal supremacy, where we're going to see popes are going to be probably the most important and powerful individuals, both worldly and religious, in Europe at the time. Really, that's going to come from Urban II, showing that he could call every Christian knight to go on a crusade. And it shows that papal supremacy is at an all-time high. Though, as you saw in section 1, that starts to fade when Philip IV, the King of France, takes out Boniface VIII and kind of starts the fall of papal supremacy. But that's 100, 200 years after Urban II's calling for the Crusades. And also, in the end, it gives Christians a wider worldview. You get a lot of knights who are going for the first time more than 10, 15 miles from the fiefs they lived on. They're going all the way across the world. There's a wider worldview, and also the Muslim learning being brought back. The big giant castles that you're going to think of when you think of the High Middle Ages are going to be possible because of the mathematics brought back from the Muslims. Philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, they're going to come back for the first time, brought back from the Byzantines and the Muslims. All that's going to be brought back, and it's going to really lay the groundwork for the great stuff we're going to talk about in section 4 that Mr. Winter's going to talk about in his flip on achievement and learning is going to be made possible by the stuff brought back by the Crusades and all that learning. But in the end, though, it does leave an extremely bitter legacy between Christians and Muslims. Even today, a lot of the jihadists are going to use the Crusades as an example of why they should hate Westerners and Christians. In fact, many jihadists still call even people from the West crusaders. And it's a bad legacy, kind of bad on both ends, and it shows you too that you know every religion is guilty at points in its history of abject violence in the name of God. So it's just kind of difficult in that regard. And also, too, as crusading armies moved through Europe on their way to the Holy Land, they also persecuted Muslims. Not Muslims, I'm sorry. They persecuted Jews. So that's another bad legacy where these crusaders are like, well, if you're not Christian, then you need to die. There's a lot of mistreatment of the Jews as crusading armies move their way through Europe on their way to the Holy Land. So kind of a bitter legacy in that regard. So there's positives and negatives that you have to look at in all these situations. One of the other things that's going to take place is in the West, there's going to be a crusade fought in Europe itself, and it's going to be in Spain as Christians try to pull back from the Muslim occupation of Spain that had been going on since the 8th century, really around the time period of the Battle of Tours in 732. This spirit is going to be not just in the Holy Lands, crusading spirit is going to be in Europe itself. And this whole idea of reconquering the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors or the Spanish Muslims is going to be known as the Reconquista. Um, the big date here is by 1085. A northern Christian king of a region of Spain known as Castile is going to take the central Muslim city of Toledo and take that back from the Moors. And once the Christians can take back this central city, they're really going to start to roll back Moorish rule of the Iberian Peninsula. By 1300, about a little less than 300 years later, Christians are going to control all of Spain except the one small city in the south called Granada. And so that city of Granada is going to hold out for quite a long time. And finally, in 1469, the different kingdoms of Christian Spain are going to be united under one unified leadership when the two most powerful kingdoms are going to have their children marry each other. So King Ferdinand of the great kingdom of Aragon and Isabella of the kingdom of Castile are going to marry and unite a Christian Spain. And once that happens, by 1492, they're able to take back that last Islamic city in Spain, Granada. That's where you get where grenade from. Granada means pomegranate. You open a pomegranate, looks like a grenade. That's where that comes from. So Granada falls to Christians in 1492, same year that Columbus sails the ocean blue. Um, Good in a way, but also kind of crappy in a way. Isabella is super hardcore Catholic, and when they take back Spain, she's not going to want anyone who's not Christian or Catholic to be in Spain. So she's going to ask the Pope to send a bunch of people called inquisitors, who would be mostly monks and friars, to come to Spain and to interview people on if they are loyal Christians or Catholics. And by interview, I mean torture until they confess to not being loyal Catholics. So she's going to actually force anyone who's not a Christian to either convert to Christianity or to leave Spain. About 150,000 Muslims and Jews are going to leave Spain. This isn't even counting the thousands who are murdered by the Inquisition. And unfortunately for Spain, most of your Catholic Christians are peasants. Most of your educated lawyers, doctors, all the educated people are Jews and Muslims. And so you're going to have a whole generation of the educated and whatnot flee from Spain because Isabella doesn't want anybody who's not a Catholic, and the church is quite complicit in this. And we're going to talk about the Pope at the time. It's not the nicest Pope, Alexander the Sixth. We'll get into him, but it really leaves kind of a black eye on the church in that you have a ton of people who are falsely accused of having been formerly Jews or Muslims converted but not being fully on board. Neighbor accusing neighbor who they might not like, and anybody under torture is going to be willing to give up and eventually confess and give up others. The name you're going to hear a lot with this is a friar named Torquemada. He's just I think he had converted himself from being Jewish to Catholic, but a lot of people die under his watch during the Inquisition. So if you've ever heard of the Spanish Inquisition, it's not a great time, and it's kind of going to leave a little black eye in the church and hurt Spain economically. But really, then the discovery of the New World is going to kind of cover up economically a lot of those issues caused by the Inquisition. But that's why I would say Isabella, not one of my favorite people in history by any means, even though in grade school she gets a lot of credit for the discovery of the New World. But we'll get to that in the next couple chapters after the Renaissance anyhow. So we'll hear from them again. But that's the Reconquista. And just to give you an idea, this map kind of color coded goes by, initially this was Catholic territory, then, by 914 to 1080. It's a slow process. You can see from about 914 to 1492, it takes to bring all of this area under Christian control. So you can kind of see here's Aragon, here's Castilla, and that's the Reconquista. Okay, so that is about it, and that leads us into section 5, which I will start a new flip with for you to watch a little later. All right.